Germany, 1923. Hyperinflation obliterates the national currency. The price of a loaf of bread reaches 200 billion marks. Families burn money in their stoves. It's cheaper than buying firewood. Then comes 1929. The Great Depression crashes down on the world. Banks collapse, factories shut down. By 1933, 6 million Germans are unemployed, nearly a third of the workforce. People starve in the streets. This is the nation Adolf Hitler inherits when he takes power in January 1933. A country shattered by two economic disasters. Yet, just 6 years later, in 1939, the situation looks entirely different. Germany invades Poland. 3 million soldiers, 3,000 tanks, 4,000 aircraft, the most advanced military in Europe. In 6 years, a ruined nation built the most formidable war machine on the planet. How was this possible? The answer lies in a phantom company, financial wizardry, and a national Ponzi scheme on an unprecedented scale. Enter the MEFO bills, a shadow banking system that secretly funded Germany's rearmament while hiding it from the world. But by 1939, the bills came due, and there was no money to pay them. Essentially, Germany had no choice but to attack its neighbors to avoid economic collapse. The Third Reich's economy wasn't just built on ideology, it depended on a financial scheme that could only survive through constant expansion. This is how Hitler financed World War II, and why economic disaster made the war inevitable. Now imagine, January 1939. You're Germany's chief economist. You know the economy is about to implode. You realize the only solution Hitler will accept is war. Do you speak the truth and risk your life, or stay silent and let catastrophe unfold? Real people faced this choice. By the end of this story, it'll be clear why every option was horrifying. But before we dive deeper, I need to ask you something. If this story grips you as much as it gripped me, subscribe to this channel. If you want me to keep telling these stories, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Country and city. I want to know who my audience is. Now let's start with the crisis that made all of this possible. To understand how desperate things were, you need to see both disasters. First, the hyperinflation of 1923. November 1923, the peak of the German mark's collapse. $1 equals 4 trillion marks. Workers demand their pay twice a day, at lunch and after their shift, because by evening, their morning wages are worthless. Restaurants update prices mid-service. Waiters climb onto tables every half hour to announce new rates. Insurance payouts, families saved for decades, can't even buy a postage stamp. This wasn't just a crisis, it was economic Armageddon. Germany's middle class loses everything. Savings, pensions, investments vanish overnight. The country barely recovers. The currency stabilizes. Life slowly improves. Then, 1929. The Great Depression hits. American banks call in loans. German businesses collapse. Unemployment soars. By 1932, 6 million are jobless, 30% of the workforce. Families sell furniture on the streets just to buy food. Engineers and teachers beg for menial labor. The Weimar government is paralyzed. Political violence erupts everywhere. Street battles between communists and Nazis turn cities into war zones. Germany endures 2 economic collapses in 14 years, and it's under these conditions that Hitler rises to power in January 1933. He promises to restore Germany's greatness, rebuild the military, defy the Treaty of Versailles. But the country is bankrupt. The treaty limits the army to 100,000 soldiers. No tanks, no planes, no submarines, no heavy artillery. Even if they were allowed, there's no money for rearmament. Yet Hitler needs weapons, massive and secret, so the world doesn't find out until it's too late. And this must be done in a country devastated by 2 economic catastrophes. Enter Hjalmar Schacht, the man who would make the impossible happen. Hjalmar Horace Greeley Schacht, born in 1877, banker, economist, financial genius. He'd already saved Germany once. In 1923, as currency commissioner, Schacht stopped hyperinflation by introducing a new currency, the Rentenmark, backed by land value. And it worked. On March 17, 1933, Hitler appoints him president of the Reichsbank, and by August 1934, Schacht becomes Minister of Economics. His mission? Fund rearmament without the world noticing. No inflation, no paper trail, no exposure of military expansion. Schacht is brilliant, and he has a plan. Here's Hitler's problem. Germany needs tanks, planes, ships, weapons. This means that payments must be made for the operations of steel mills, arms manufacturers, and chemical plants. But if the Reichsbank simply starts printing money and using it to pay for these expenses, two catastrophic consequences will follow. First, inflation will skyrocket again. The German people won't survive it. They remember 1923. Second, all these payments will be reflected in the Reichsbank's accounting. Foreign governments will see this. They'll realize that Germany is actively rearming and will intervene long before Hitler is ready. He needs invisible money, funds that don't cause inflation, funds that don't appear in official records. And Schacht creates such money. In 1934, he establishes a company called Metallurgische Forschungsgesellschaft, MBH, the Society for Metallurgical Research, or MEFO for short. On paper, it's an ordinary research consortium. Its formal owners are four major German corporations: Siemens, Krupp, Rheinmetall, and GHH. Its nominal capital is laughable, just 1 million Reichsmarks. But in reality, MEFO does nothing. It's a shell, a dummy organization with nothing but letterhead and a bank account. And it is this front company that becomes the primary source of funding for the largest rearmament program in world history. Here's how the scheme worked. Imagine you're a German arms manufacturer. In 1935, the government places an order with you for 1,000 tanks. But instead of paying you in Reichsmarks, they issue you MEFO bills. These are promissory notes, IOUs issued by the phantom company. Essentially, checks guaranteeing that MEFO will pay the specified amount in 5 years. But you can't wait 5 years. You need to pay your workers, buy metal, and keep production running. So you go to a regular private bank. The bank looks at the bills and thinks, MEFO is backed by the Reichsbank, which means the state guarantees payment. And the bank gives you real Reichsmarks, maybe at a slight discount, but it pays. Are you happy? You've got your money. But here's where the real financial magic begins. Now the bills are with the private bank. The bank takes them to the Reichsbank. And the Reichsbank converts these MEFO bills into cash, using its power to issue currency. But the key point is that these transactions don't appear in the Reichsbank's official balance sheet. The bills are considered private liabilities. This isn't state debt. It's not Reichsbank debt. Formally, it's the debt of an ordinary private research firm. And when other countries look at Germany's financial reports, they don't see the massive rearmament spending. It's simply hidden. From 1934 to 1938, Germany issued MEFO bills worth 12 billion Reichsmarks. For comparison, Germany's entire national debt in 1934 was about 10 billion. So the country secretly created hidden liabilities exceeding its entire previous debt to fund its military buildup. And the outside world realized the true scale of what was happening far too late. By 1936, Germany had violated every single military restriction of the Treaty of Versailles. It had tanks, planes, submarines, a modern army. The Allies didn't intervene because they had no idea how far Germany had gone. But there was one problem. The bills were due in 5 years. The first were issued in 1934, so repayment would come due in 1939, and Germany didn't have 12 billion to pay them back. Time was running out. And this is where the comparison to a pyramid scheme becomes precise. A pyramid scheme works like this. Investors are promised returns, and payments to old participants are made with money from new ones. As long as new money keeps coming in, the scheme holds. But one day the flow stops, and everything collapses. The Third Reich operated the same way, MEFO bills. Germany hoped that future economic growth would allow it to cover its obligations. But by 1938, the economy could no longer generate enough revenue. The scheme required new injections. Where to get 12 billion Reichsmarks when the economy couldn't produce them? The answer was simple: take it from others. March 1938, Germany annexes Austria, the Anschluss. Austria has gold reserves, foreign currency, an industrial base. All of it falls into German hands. September 1938, the Munich Agreement. Germany takes the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia. March 1939, the occupation of the rest of Czechoslovakia. The country has gold reserves and the Skoda factory, one of Europe's most advanced arms complexes. And Hitler seizes it all. September 1939, the invasion of Poland. Poland has agriculture, minerals, millions of people who can be forced to work. Germany takes everything. The Nazi economy wasn't just immoral, it was built in such a way that it required constant conquest. As one historian put it, they really did have to invade a couple of countries to keep the scheme going. Hjalmar Schacht saw where this was headed. As early as 1937, he warned Hitler the economy was overheating, the spending was unsustainable, and the country was heading for financial collapse. Hitler ignores him. On January 7, 1939, just weeks before the first MEFO bills were due, Schacht submits a desperate report on behalf of the Reichsbank leadership. In it, he demands cuts to military spending, reduced costs, and a balanced budget, the only way to prevent inflation and economic collapse. Hitler's response? On January 20, 1939, he fires Schacht as head of the Reichsbank. Schacht had built the machine, but its design contained a ticking time bomb from the start. And Hitler's solution wasn't to defuse it, it was to keep feeding it more fuel. That fuel was Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, later France, the Soviet Union, any country that could be invaded. For Hitler, war wasn't just ideology. It was an economic necessity. By 1939, Germany faced two choices: financial catastrophe or expansion. Hitler chose expansion, but the MEFO bills were far from the only source of income. The Nazi economy had far darker revenue streams. When Germany seized territory, it didn't stop at military control. The country was systematically looted. Gold, currency reserves, artwork, industrial machinery, raw materials, all shipped back to Germany. Germany imposed so-called occupation costs. France was forced to pay Germany 400 million francs every day just for being occupied. In other words, the country was paying for its own enslavement. In the Soviet Union, the Nazis planned to drain grain, oil, and metals, anything that could fuel Germany's war machine. The entire Reich's economic model was parasitic, and then came slave labor. Concentration camp prisoners were used as free labor in German factories, assembling weapons, manufacturing parts, mining coal. Companies like IG Farben, Siemens, and Krupp worked prisoners to death. When they died, they were simply replaced. The Nazi economy wasn't just built on plunder, it was built on slavery. This wasn't just immoral, it was the economic architecture of genocide. Another example of the depths of Nazi fraud was the Volkswagen project, the people's car. Germans were promised that by saving money through the labor front, they could buy their own car. Make small payments, get a shiny new Volkswagen. Citizens saved up 275 million Reichsmarks. How many civilian cars were ever produced under the Third Reich? 0. The factory was converted to produce military vehicles like the Kübelwagen. Ordinary Germans lost all their savings. Repayments only began in the 1960s. The Nazi economy didn't just rob conquered nations, it robbed its own citizens. And then there was another scheme. In the 1920s and early 1930s, Germany borrowed heavily from Britain, France, and the US, officially to pay Versailles Treaty reparations. Germany got the money. But when Hitler took power in 1933, he simply stopped reparations payments. The loans, however, were never repaid. So Hitler used money borrowed from Britain and France to build an army that later invaded Britain and France. And after occupying France in 1940, the Vichy government even wrote off part of the debt. Germany got free money from its future enemies. And of course, there was the confiscation of Jewish property, businesses, bank accounts, homes, artwork, all seized by the state, sold off, and used to fund the regime. This wasn't just persecution, it was systematic robbery financing the government. Every aspect of the Nazi economy was built on taking from others. By 1939, the Nazi economy was propped up by MEFO bills, plunder, slave labor, and theft. None of it sustainable. The MEFO bills were nearing maturity. Germany couldn't pay them without looting more countries. The economy was overheating, inflation was creeping back, shortages were emerging. Schacht had warned this would happen. He was right. But instead of retreating, Germany accelerated, because retreat meant economic collapse, unemployment, political crisis, the end of the Nazi regime. Hitler's only option was to keep going. This is what most people don't understand about Nazi Germany. War wasn't just ideology, it was economic necessity. The Nazi economy was designed to require constant expansion. Without conquest, it would collapse. Historian Adam Tooze wrote about this in his book, The Wages of Destruction, The Making and Breaking of the Nazi Economy. His thesis, Nazi Germany lived on borrowed time from day one. The economic model demanded perpetual war to survive. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, it wasn't just about Lebensraum or racial ideology. It was about Caucasus oil, Ukrainian grain, the resources needed to stave off economic collapse. War was the economy. The economy was war. And when Germany began losing territory in 1943-1944, the economic model crumbled. No more plunder, no more resources, just endless expenses. The Nazi economy was a pyramid scheme, and like all pyramids, it collapsed. So, how did Hitler pay for World War II? He didn't. Here's why. The Nazi economy rested on 4 pillars. The first, creative accounting. MEFO bills hid 12 billion Reichsmarks in debt off the books, enabling secret rearmament and the creation of a war machine, while the world believed Germany was still recovering. Schacht's genius lay in inventing invisible money. But that money was still debt, and debts must be paid. The second, plunder. Germany funded its war by stealing from everyone it conquered. Austrian gold, Czech arms factories, French occupation payments, Soviet grain, Polish labor. The Nazi economy was parasitic. It demanded constant new victims. The third, slavery. Concentration camp prisoners, POWs, forced laborers from occupied nations. Their exhausted bodies built the weapons and infrastructure for new conquests to secure more slaves. The economic model was inseparable from genocide. The fourth, theft. Jewish property, repudiated Versailles Treaty debts, cancelled reparations, even swindling German savers through the Volkswagen scam. Every aspect of the Nazi economy involved taking without compensation. Was the Nazi economy essentially a Ponzi scheme? Yes. Early investors were paid with the spoils from later ones, but the later investors were entire countries. Conquest was the payout. MEFO bills came due in 1939. Germany had no money, so it invaded Poland. Polish loot financed the campaign in France. French plunder funded the invasion of the USSR. As long as Germany kept winning and looting, the scheme worked. But the moment expansion stopped, everything collapsed. That's why war was inevitable. In 1939, Hitler had 2 choices: expand or implode. The Nazi economy wasn't built for peace, it was built for war. That's how Hitler paid for World War II, with promises he couldn't keep, money he didn't have, resources he stole, and labor he enslaved. The Nazi war machine ran not on economic strength, but on a fraudulent system requiring endless conquest. And when the conquests ended, the economy died with the regime. If you found this interesting, be sure to like or dislike. See you soon.